When words fail, silence becomes the truth teller. And sometimes the quiet you choose can save a relationship, protect your peace, and reveal who truly stands with you. Silence is a form of emotional protection, not weakness. It is one of the most misunderstood strengths a person can hold. People often assume that when someone chooses not to respond, not to fight back, or not to defend themselves loudly, they must be afraid, insecure, or powerless. But silence is rarely the tool of the weak. It is the shield of the wise. It is the sanctuary of the emotionally mature, and it is the refuge of those who understand that peace is too precious to waste on battles that cannot be won with noise. There are moments in life when you realize that reacting is not worth the emotional cost. Words can become weapons. Arguments can become storms. And emotional energy, once spent, cannot be restored easily. Silence becomes a form of self-preservation, the quiet decision to protect your inner world from unnecessary fires. It is the act of choosing your mental and spiritual well-being over temporary satisfaction. And that choice requires far more strength than shouting ever could. Many people are conditioned to believe that the loudest voice wins the argument. But emotional protection is not about winning. It is about preserving the integrity of your heart. When you choose silence, you are refusing to let someone else dictate your emotional state. You are refusing to let anger hijack your clarity. You are refusing to let frustration push you into behaviors you will later regret. Silence gives you the time and space needed to understand what matters, what doesn't, and what deserves your response. People often misread silence because they cannot comprehend discipline. They cannot imagine holding back words when the mind is overflowing with thoughts, or walking away from conflict when pride is whispering, "Stand your ground." Silence requires you to resist the urge to prove yourself. It demands emotional mastery, the ability to feel everything yet choose to say nothing when nothing needs to be said. That is not weakness. That is wisdom lived out loud without a single sound. When someone tries to provoke you, your silence becomes a barrier they cannot penetrate. Noise feeds conflict. Silence starves it. And in that quiet space, the truth reveals itself. You begin to see who is genuinely seeking understanding and who is merely seeking chaos. You begin to see what conversations are worth your vulnerability and which ones are traps designed to drain your spirit. Silence helps you read people more clearly. It helps you read yourself more clearly. When you are silent, you can finally hear the thoughts you were too overwhelmed to notice before. Silence also protects your dignity. When people are angry, they often speak from a place of pain, not truth. Words thrown in the heat of emotion can wound deeply, and responding with equal force only multiplies the injury. But silence creates a boundary that says, "I will not join you in this dark place. I will not lower myself to match your chaos." It preserves who you are, even when someone else tries to pull you into who they are becoming in the moment. There is also a sacred power in not explaining yourself to people who have already decided not to understand you. You do not need to prove your worth, justify your feelings, or convince anyone of your intentions. Silence becomes emotional armor that shields you from the exhaustion of over-explaining. It communicates without words that your time and energy are not up for negotiation. They are yours, and you have the authority to protect them. Silence allows you to reclaim control over your emotions. When everything around you feels loud and overwhelming, stepping into quietness creates balance. It allows your heart to slow down, your mind to process, and your spirit to reset. Instead of reacting from hurt, you respond, if you choose to respond at all, from clarity. Silence turns emotional chaos into internal order. It transforms confusion into understanding. It helps you rise above instead of sinking below. There is also beauty in understanding that silence is not always directed at others. It is also a gift you give yourself. It is the peace you choose when your thoughts need room to breathe. It is the pause you take when your emotions need time to settle. It is the boundary you draw when your soul needs rest. Silence becomes a sanctuary where healing begins before you even realize it. When you allow quietness into your life, you soften the noise within you, not just the noise around you. Many people fear silence because they associate it with emptiness. But silence is often full of understanding, full of clarity, full of strength. It is in the quiet moments that you learn what truly matters. You discover the conversations that lift you instead of those that break you. You understand the relationships worth nurturing and the ones worth releasing. Silence becomes the compass guiding you toward emotional freedom. And while silence protects, it also teaches. It teaches you patience, because holding your tongue when your ego wants to speak requires deep restraint. It teaches you humility, because you learn that not every moment must be about your voice. It teaches you resilience, because staying calm in the face of provocation is one of the hardest things a person can do. And it teaches you trust in your ability to stand firm in your truth without shouting it for validation. Silence is not the absence of power. It is the presence of self-control. It is not the absence of feeling. It is the mastery of emotion. It is not the absence of response. It is the intelligent decision to wait until responding serves a purpose. Silence is the quiet language of the strong, the steady rhythm of the wise, and the invisible shield of those who know their peace is not something they are willing to sacrifice. When you choose silence, you are choosing yourself. You are choosing your mental health, your emotional balance, your spiritual grounding. You are choosing to protect your energy from being wasted on people who do not value it. You are choosing to rise above noise that cannot reach the level of your calm. And none of it is weakness. Silence is strength wrapped in gentleness. It is power wrapped in calm. It is protection wrapped in grace. Quietness creates space for clarity, intuition, and truth to rise. In a world overflowing with noise, voices, opinions, demands, expectations, it becomes easy to lose touch with your inner self. The constant pressure to respond, react, explain, defend, and stay connected can cloud your thoughts and drown out the whispers of your own wisdom. Quietness is not simply the absence of words. It is the presence of awareness. It is a sacred pause that allows the mind to settle, the heart to speak, and the truth to finally reveal itself. When you step into quietness, even for a moment, you step out of the overwhelming rhythm of the world and into the steady rhythm of your own breath. You begin to notice things you could not see before, thoughts you ignored, feelings you pushed aside, truths you were too distracted to acknowledge. Clarity begins to rise, not because the world changes, but because your perspective does. Silence softens the noise inside you, and suddenly everything becomes easier to understand. Quietness is a cleansing force. It washes away the fog created by stress, frustration, and overthinking. It frees the mind from looping thoughts and restless anxieties. When you give yourself permission to pause, your thoughts can finally align in their natural order. You begin to see what is real and what is imagined, what matters and what never did. Clarity is not found by thinking harder, but by thinking less, by giving the mind room to breathe and the heart room to guide. Intuition also thrives in quiet spaces. It does not scream. It does not demand attention. It whispers. It nudges. It speaks softly from the center of your being. But you cannot hear it when you are busy defending yourself, arguing, explaining, or proving something to someone who may not even care. Noise blocks intuition. Silence amplifies it. When you embrace quietness, your intuition begins to move forward like a gentle but steady wave. Suddenly, you know which path feels right, even if you cannot explain why. You sense who is genuine and who is not, even before the facts reveal themselves. You understand when to speak and when to walk away. You recognize the difference between impulsive emotion and inner guidance. This is the gift of quietness. It reconnects you with the part of yourself that already knows the way. Truth also has a habit of rising when everything around you becomes still. Truth is patient. It waits for you to silence the world long enough to hear it. Sometimes the truth you need is about a situation, why something happened, what is really going on beneath the surface, what is motivating someone's actions. Other times the truth is about yourself, what you are afraid to admit, what you truly want, what you must let go of to grow. In quietness, masks fall away. Pretenses dissolve. You can no longer hide from what you feel or pretend you are okay when you are not. But this honesty is a blessing, not a burden. Truth sets the direction for your next step. Truth gives you emotional vision. It removes confusion and brings acceptance. It becomes the foundation on which better decisions are built. Quietness is also a form of inner listening. Most people spend their lives listening outward, to the world, to criticism, to noise, to expectations, but very few learn to listen inward. When you allow quietness to fill your space, you begin to hear the subtle messages your mind and heart have been trying to send all along. The body speaks through tension, the heart speaks through longing, the spirit speaks through intuition. In silence, all these voices become clear. Quietness teaches you the difference between reacting and responding. In noise, you react. Reaction is automatic, emotional, often unfiltered. In quietness, you respond. Response is intentional, thoughtful, rooted in understanding. Quietness gives your thoughts time to mature before they turn into actions. It guides you to choose your words carefully, protect your energy, and move in alignment with your values. Quietness also brings emotional balance. When you feel overwhelmed, silence helps you find your center again. It soothes the nervous system, calms the breath, reduces emotional heat, and resets the mind. It creates a space where you can observe your feelings instead of being consumed by them. Anger softens, anxiety loosens its grip, fear becomes smaller. Quietness allows emotions to pass through without staying longer than they need to. In relationships, quietness can prevent unnecessary conflicts. It gives you a moment to reflect before responding. It allows the heat of emotions to lower so that communication can happen with clarity instead of tension. Sometimes stepping into silence doesn't mean stepping away from someone. It means stepping toward wisdom. Quietness helps you understand what someone truly meant, not just what they said. It helps you avoid saying things that cannot be taken back. It protects bonds that could easily be damaged by reactive words. Quietness also offers you perspective. Life looks different when you slow down and observe instead of rushing to participate. Problems that once felt overwhelming suddenly appear manageable. Situations that confused you begin to make sense. Pain that felt unbearable starts to reveal its lessons. Perspective is something noise can never give you, only quietness can. Quietness strengthens your spirit. It builds resilience, patience, and emotional depth. It teaches you that you do not need to respond to everything, that not every battle is worth fighting, that peace is worth protecting. It shows you that your value does not come from being loud, but from being grounded. Quietness allows you to reclaim your own voice. your true voice, not the one shaped by fear, insecurity, or pressure from others. In silence, you discover what you believe, what you desire, what you refuse to tolerate, and what you are ready to pursue. You become aligned with yourself again. And perhaps the most beautiful part is this: truth always rises in quietness. No matter how messy life becomes, no matter how loud the world feels, no matter how lost you think you are, quietness brings you back. It clears the fog, it sharpens your intuition, it reveals what is hidden, it reconnects you with your inner compass. When you learn to trust the quiet within you, life becomes less chaotic and more meaningful. You move with intention, you make decisions with clarity, you speak with purpose, you live from a place of truth. Quietness becomes not just a moment, but a way of being, a steady, powerful source of clarity and wisdom. Choosing silence ends unnecessary conflicts and preserves peace. It is a truth that only becomes clear with time and experience. There are countless moments in life when saying nothing becomes the most intelligent response you can give. Not because you are afraid, not because you are defeated, but because you finally understand that not every battle deserves your energy, your words, or your emotional involvement. Silence becomes the way you protect your sanity and keep your heart from becoming exhausted by unnecessary storms. Conflicts often grow, not because they are meaningful, but because both sides keep feeding them with reactions. Words pile on top of words, emotions rise, misunderstandings multiply, and suddenly something small becomes something heavy. But when you choose silence, you break the chain. You refuse to add fuel to a fire that was never meant to burn so long. Silence becomes the water that cools the heat of conflict before it becomes destructive. It takes emotional strength to remain silent in moments when anger invites you to speak, when pride urges you to defend yourself, when hurt tempts you to lash out. But silence in these moments is not weakness. It is mastery. It is the ability to put peace above ego, clarity above chaos, and wisdom above impulse. Silence gives you the space to step back, breathe, and see the situation for what it truly is, instead of what your emotions imagine it to be. You begin to understand that many conflicts are born from misunderstanding rather than malice. People often speak from frustration, from insecurity, from their own unhealed experiences. Silence gives you the ability to recognize this. Instead of reacting to their pain, you allow the wave to pass. And once emotions settle, the truth of the situation becomes clearer. Silence is the gap where healing begins, where clarity returns, where the heart steadies itself again. There are also conflicts that are simply unnecessary, arguments that solve nothing, debates that lead nowhere, confrontations that only drain your spirit. You may try to explain yourself, defend yourself, justify yourself, only to find that the other person is not listening to understand, but listening to reply. In these moments, silence becomes your protection. When you choose not to engage, the conflict loses its power over you. You no longer dance to the rhythm of someone else's anger. Silence also teaches you to value your peace more than your need to be right. Being right is a temporary satisfaction. Being peaceful is a lifelong blessing. There is freedom in realizing that you don't have to fight every time someone misunderstands you. There is strength in letting go of the need to prove your point. Silence is the sign of someone who knows their worth, doesn't depend on winning arguments or gaining approval. When you stop participating in unnecessary conflicts, you begin to see how much energy you save. Your mind becomes clearer. Your emotions become calmer. Your days become lighter. Silence creates emotional space where joy, creativity, and self-awareness can grow. You no longer waste your energy on battles that drain you. Instead, you invest it in things that strengthen you. Choosing silence does not mean you avoid every conflict. It means you choose your battles wisely. You understand that not every disagreement requires your voice. Some require your silence, some require your patience, some require your distance, and even when you do choose to speak, silence gives you the wisdom to communicate with calmness instead of chaos. Silence also reveals the true intentions of others. When you stop reacting, you start seeing. You see who values peace and who thrives on conflict. You see who approaches with understanding and who comes with hostility. You see who is willing to communicate respectfully and who only wants to dominate the conversation. Silence is a filter. It separates those who want resolution from those who want control. In relationships, silence can prevent unnecessary damage. Words spoken in anger can leave scars that silence never would. Taking a moment of quiet before responding can change the entire direction of a conversation. It allows you to speak from understanding rather than emotion. Silence becomes a bridge that leads back to connection instead of a wall that creates more separation. Silence does not only protect relationships, it also protects your inner world. Inner peace is fragile. It can be shaken by tension, disrupted by argument, or disturbed by negativity. But when you choose silence, you guard that peace. You create a boundary that says, my calm is not up for negotiation. People may expect you to react, but silence keeps you anchored. It keeps you centered. It keeps you aligned with your own emotional truth. Choosing silence also transforms your perception of strength. You begin to understand that power is not found in shouting louder, but in staying calm. Wisdom is not found in constant talking, but in mindful listening. Maturity is not about winning every argument, but knowing which arguments are not worth having. Silence becomes the language of emotional intelligence. Silence allows conflicts to resolve themselves naturally. When you don't add more intensity, the situation eventually loses momentum. People calm down, perspectives shift, truth surfaces, solutions become clearer. Silence creates space for resolution that cannot be achieved through force. You stop fighting the storm and allow it to pass. And when it passes, you come out stronger, wiser, and more grounded. When you choose silence, you also learn to trust yourself. You trust that you don't need immediate responses to validate your feelings. You trust that your peace matters. You trust that the right words will come at the right time. Silence builds inner confidence, the kind that doesn't need to prove anything. Most importantly, silence preserves your emotional well-being. Conflicts take a toll. They drain your mental focus, shake your emotional balance, and sometimes even create guilt or regret. But silence gives you authority over your own state of mind. You decide when to engage, how to respond, and when to walk away. Silence places you in control, not the conflict. Choosing silence is choosing peace. Choosing silence is choosing maturity. Choosing silence is choosing your own growth over temporary satisfaction. And in the end, silence becomes a powerful reminder that not everything needs your voice. Sometimes it needs your stillness, your strength, and your refusal to surrender your peace to unnecessary battles. People reveal their true intentions when you stop reacting. It is only when you step back from the noise, from the emotional intensity, and from the instinct to defend yourself that the truth of a person begins to rise. Reaction often becomes a fog. It blurs your vision, distracts your mind, and keeps you too focused on your own feelings to see what the other person is truly doing. But when you detach, when you become calm, when you allow silence instead of emotional response, you create the perfect environment for truth to expose itself without you lifting a finger. Reactions feed people. They give them power, attention, and emotional leverage. As long as you react, people can manipulate, provoke, or persuade you. They can hide behind their masks because your emotional response becomes the center of the interaction. But when you stop reacting, the spotlight shifts. Suddenly, the other person's words, motives, and behavior become clearer. You begin to see their intentions without the filter of your own emotions clouding the view. Silence becomes a mirror. It reflects the other person back to themselves. Some people become uncomfortable when you don't respond because they can no longer control the narrative. They can no longer use your reactions to justify their behavior. They can no longer twist your words or feed off your energy. Your stillness exposes what they were trying to hide. When you stop reacting, people can no longer hide behind excuses. If someone was only being kind to get something from you, that truth shows itself when your energy is no longer available to them. If someone was pushing your buttons just to see you lose control, that becomes obvious when you refuse to give them the satisfaction. If someone was pretending to care, silence reveals the limits of their patience, effort, and attention. People who truly care will approach you with understanding. Those who were only pretending will vanish, complain, or attack. Your reaction often shields others from the consequences of their own behavior. For example, if someone is rude and you react emotionally, the focus shifts to your reaction instead of their disrespect. But if you remain calm, their behavior stands alone, exposed, undeniable. They are forced to face themselves because you have removed yourself from the emotional battlefield. Silence becomes the spotlight that reveals what was hidden in the shadows. When you stop reacting, you begin to see patterns. Some people only reach out when they need something. Some only provoke you because they enjoy the control it gives them. Some apologize only when they fear losing you, not because they understand the depth of their actions. When you remove your emotional energy from the equation, you see who continues showing up and who disappears. You also learn which relationships are built on mutual respect and which ones rely on your emotional labor. Reaction often covers reality. You might react because you feel guilty, afraid, or responsible for someone else's feelings. But when you stop reacting, you allow yourself to observe. You start to understand who is genuinely trying to communicate and who is trying to manipulate, who is seeking peace and who is seeking control, who values your presence and who values your response. People reveal their intentions by how they behave when you don't give them what they want. If someone wanted power over you, they will escalate their behavior. If someone wanted your attention, they will become frustrated. If someone wanted understanding, they will approach with patience. If someone valued the relationship, they will try to rebuild the connection respectfully. Your lack of reaction becomes a truth test, and people cannot hide their nature under silence. Not reacting also helps you see the emotional maturity of others. A mature person will respect your need for space. They will wait, reflect, or ask gently if you are okay. An immature person will pressure you, accuse you, guilt trip you, or try to provoke you again. They reveal their emotional age through their response to your silence. Stopping your reactions also teaches you about the foundations of people's loyalty. Loyalty is not proven in moments when everything is good. It is proven in moments when you are unavailable, quiet, or distant. Those who care will stay connected even when you're not emotionally feeding them. Those who were attached to your reactions rather than your being will eventually drift away. Silence becomes a filter, separating relationship from attachment, connection from dependency, sincerity from performance. Another truth that emerges when you stop reacting is the intentions behind someone's anger. Some people express anger because they are hurt, confused, or overwhelmed. But others use anger as a weapon. They use it to intimidate, control, or weaken you. When you remain calm, their anger becomes transparent. You begin to understand whether it is a cry for understanding or a tactic for dominance. Without your reaction feeding it, their anger either dissolves or intensifies. And either way, the truth becomes visible. Even in professional or social environments, not reacting reveals who respects you and who does not. Those who speak behind your back become more obvious when you stop engaging with their drama. Those who tried to manipulate you become easier to identify when your silence disrupts their strategy. Those who relied on your emotional responses to assert superiority suddenly have nothing to stand on. Silence is not passive. It is active observation. It is heightened awareness. It is the quiet decision to gather information that your emotions once blocked. And as you observe, you begin to understand every relationship more clearly. You no longer guess people's intentions. You witness them. When you stop reacting, you give people the chance to reveal their truth, not the version you hoped for, not the version you excused, not the version you imagined, but the version they really are beneath the surface. Some truths will disappoint you, but they will set you free. Other truths will comfort you, reminding you who is truly worth holding on to. Silence becomes your most powerful lens. It shows you what noise never could. And in that clarity, you learn one of life's greatest lessons. Not everyone deserves your reaction, and not everyone deserves access to your emotions. Your silence protects your peace and reveals the truth. Truth about others, truth about relationships, and truth about the intentions that were always there, waiting to be seen. Silence communicates boundaries more powerfully than arguments. When you step back from the need to explain, justify, defend, or prove yourself, something remarkable happens. People begin to understand where your lines are drawn without you ever having to outline them with words. Silence becomes the language of self-respect, the calm yet unshakable signal that says, "This is as far as you can go with me." Arguments can be twisted, ignored, or misinterpreted, but silence is unmistakable. It cannot be debated, negotiated, or manipulated. It simply stands there, clear, firm, undeniable. Arguments often come from a place of wanting someone to understand your point of view. You raise your voice, explain your feelings, try to make them see your worth, or acknowledge their wrongs. But the truth is, people who truly value you don't need long explanations, and people who don't value you will never understand, no matter how many times you repeat yourself. Silence removes you from this exhausting cycle. It teaches others far more about your boundaries than any lecture ever could. Silence is a boundary because it takes you out of the emotional arena. When you choose not to engage in disrespect, manipulation, or chaos, you quietly communicate that you are unavailable for anything that threatens your peace. You're not saying, "I deserve better." You're showing it, you're living it, you're embodying it. Silence shows people that their behavior no longer has access to your energy. And when people lose access to your reactions, they become painfully aware of how far they have crossed, far more aware than if you tried to argue them into understanding. Arguments tend to escalate conflict. They invite more words, more excuses, more accusations, more misunderstandings. But silence ends the escalation. Silence halts the momentum. It sets an invisible barrier that says, "I'm not participating in this dynamic anymore." And because silence cannot be challenged the same way words can, it forces others to confront the impact of their actions on their own. Silence also protects your emotional energy. Explaining your boundaries in the middle of chaos is like trying to plant flowers in a storm. Nothing grows in that environment. The other person is often too defensive, too reactive, or too emotionally charged to truly hear you. Silence removes you from that storm. It waits for the winds to die down. It allows you to protect yourself from saying things you might regret. In silence, you reclaim power not through force, but through restraint. Silence communicates boundaries because it shows that your attention is not guaranteed. Your presence is not guaranteed. Your emotional availability is not guaranteed. When you stop responding to someone's disrespectful tone, passive-aggressive remarks, manipulative behavior, or emotional immaturity, they eventually notice that something precious is missing: you. Your silence becomes a signpost pointing to your value, a quiet reminder that access to you is earned, not owed. Some people only understand boundaries when they feel the absence of your reactions. When you argue, they focus on winning. When you explain, they focus on defending. But when you are silent, they are left alone with their actions. They have to sit with the discomfort of their own behavior. Silence lets their conscience do what your words could never accomplish. Silence also shifts the power dynamic. Arguments put both people on equal footing, two voices clashing, two egos colliding. But silence changes the structure completely. It removes you from the conflict, leaving the other person struggling to navigate the interaction on their own. Without your emotional response to guide them, they reveal their true character. Do they respond with patience or pressure, respect or aggression, understanding or ego? Your silence exposes them in ways words never could. Choosing silence can be especially powerful in relationships where one person tends to talk over you, belittle your feelings, or dominate the conversation. When you become silent, you are no longer giving them a platform. You are no longer feeding the power imbalance. Silence becomes your shield. It allows you to step away from the emotional noise and create space for your voice to regain its strength. Silence does not mean withdrawal forever. It means taking the time to speak only when you can speak with intention rather than emotion. It means allowing yourself to define your boundaries internally before expressing them externally. But by the time you choose to speak again, if you choose to speak, the other person has already felt the impact of your quiet boundary. Silence is also deeply connected to self-worth. People who value themselves do not waste time arguing with those who refuse to listen. They do not defend their boundaries repeatedly. They do not stay emotionally available to those who take advantage of their kindness. Silence becomes the immediate response of someone who knows their value. It says, "I'm not here to convince you of what I already know." Silence can save relationships just as much as it can end them. It prevents you from saying things that would damage the connection beyond repair. It gives both people space to reflect, to cool down, to understand. It encourages the other person to recognize their own mistakes without feeling attacked. Sometimes, silence is the bridge that helps people meet again with more clarity and compassion. But silence can also reveal when a relationship is beyond repair. If your silence is met with indifference, disrespect, or further aggression, it tells you everything you need to know. Your boundary was not valued, your peace was not considered, and no amount of argument would have changed that reality. Silence becomes both your protection and your confirmation. Silence teaches you emotional discipline. It helps you understand that every engagement is a choice. You don't have to attend every argument. You don't owe immediate replies to disrespect. You don't have to explain your pain to someone who caused it. Silence gives you the freedom to prioritize peace without feeling guilty for it. Silence is powerful because it creates space. Space for reflection, space for emotional cooling, space for clarity, space for truth, Space for the other person to step toward you instead of you always stepping toward them. Space for your boundaries to stand strong without you having to shout them. In the end, silence communicates what arguments never can. That you value yourself enough to walk away from what harms your peace. And that anyone who wants to remain in your life must learn to respect that peace rather than challenge it. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is communication in its purest, strongest form. There comes a moment in your life when you finally understand that peace is not found in proving a point, winning an argument, or responding to every misunderstanding that comes your way. It's found in the quiet spaces you choose to hold. The older you grow, the more you realize that not every conflict is worth stepping into, and not every situation deserves your energy, your breath, or your emotional investment. Some conflicts, when left untouched, simply dissolve on their own. Silence becomes more than an absence of sound. It becomes a strategy, a shield, and a profound declaration of self-respect. People often assume that silence is surrender. They think choosing not to respond means you have no words, no strength, or no courage. But the truth is the opposite. Silence takes a different kind of bravery. It requires emotional maturity, discipline, and a calm understanding that your inner peace is more valuable than temporary validation. You reach a place where you stop feeding fires that were never yours to put out. You stop participating in chaos that was never yours to carry. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You learn that quiet is sometimes the strongest move you can make. Conflict pulls you into a narrow emotional space. It demands quick reactions, defensive words, and a sense of urgency that steals your clarity. When you walk into every conflict, you teach people that you are always available for emotional battles. But when you stop responding, when you stop feeding negativity with your energy, something shifts. The situation begins to lose its power. The person trying to provoke you begins to lose their script. The drama loses its momentum. Many conflicts are like small fires. They burn only as long as you keep adding fuel. Remove your voice, remove your attention, and the flames soften on their own. Silence gives you space. It allows your emotions to settle and your thoughts to breathe. When you don't react instantly, you can see the situation through a clearer lens. You recognize what deserves your time and what doesn't. You can distinguish between someone seeking resolution and someone seeking control. You notice who truly wants to understand you and who simply wants to win. Silence creates a moment of distance that protects you from impulsive decisions, harsh words, or regrets you would have to carry. It transforms what could have been a battle into a moment of introspection. Not every conflict is a call to arms. Some conflicts are invitations to reevaluate. They ask you to question whether someone's opinion actually matters, whether the situation affects your future, or whether it is merely noise passing through your life. When you pause, when you remain quiet, you discover how many things were never as serious as they felt in the moment. You notice how many disagreements were fueled by misunderstanding, stress, ego, or timing. And you realize that silence could have saved you from emotional exhaustion long before you learned how to use it. Quiet is not avoidance. It is wisdom. It is a recognition that you are not obligated to entertain every disturbance. You have the right to walk away from what drains you. You have the right to choose peace over proving yourself. You have the right to protect your emotional equilibrium. Silence becomes your way of saying, I value my peace more than this argument. And that statement, even without words, carries a power that echoes far beyond noise. The truth is, when you stop reacting, people reveal themselves. The conflict reveals itself. You begin to see who only wanted your attention, who wanted your submission, who wanted your chaos. You also see who respects your silence, who values harmony, who approaches you with gentleness when you don't respond immediately. The quiet becomes a mirror. It reflects truth without confrontation. It shows you what stands on its own and what collapses without your participation. There are conflicts that grow only because you argue back. The moment you stop responding, they lose their purpose. The moment you choose not to engage, they fall apart. Silence isn't denial. It's a form of emotional cleansing. It filters out what never belonged to your spirit. It removes you from places where your heart is not safe. It frees you from the emotional tug of war that drains your energy and blocks your growth. Quiet becomes your boundary, a boundary that says you will not argue simply because someone invites you to. There is power in letting things resolve on their own. Life has a way of settling dust when you don't stir it. Time reveals truths that arguments never will. Distance clarifies intentions. People who needed to be in your life find their way back with maturity. People who were meant to leave drift away through silence. Conflicts that once felt heavy begin to look small under the light of perspective. And you learn, deeply learn, that sometimes the best action is inaction, the best reply is none, and the best protection is peace. Quiet is not empty. It is full of strength, full of restraint, full of self-respect. It is a declaration that your emotional world is yours to guard. You no longer let every disturbance enter your space. You no longer react to every spark. You have learned that not every conflict deserves your voice, and not every moment of tension needs your involvement. You understand that some conflicts are best left untouched because they were never meant to be battles. They dissolve when you refuse to carry them. And so you step back, you breathe, you choose silence not because you are weak, but because you are finally strong enough to prioritize your peace over temporary emotional storms. You trust yourself more, you trust the quiet more. You allow life to unfold without forcing explanations. You allow the noise to pass without becoming part of it. And in this calm, powerful silence, you discover the freedom that comes from responding only when it truly matters, and recognizing that most conflicts do not. There is a rare kind of power in choosing silence, a power that grows quietly inside you without asking for recognition. When you begin to honor silence, you discover that it becomes a teacher, one that does not shout, does not force, does not demand, but guides you toward emotional strength in ways loud moments never could. Silence is not simply the absence of words. It is the presence of understanding. It is the moment you pause before reacting, the moment you retreat inward to check your truth, the moment you value peace over urgency. In that stillness, you begin to grow in ways others cannot easily see but can deeply feel. Emotional strength is not built through constant confrontation. It is not measured by how loudly you defend yourself or how quickly you react when provoked. Strength is cultivated in the quiet where you learn to hold your emotions steady, where you learn to observe rather than absorb, where you grow into someone who cannot be easily shaken. When you choose silence, you give yourself space to breathe, to reflect, and to digest what is happening around you. Most people respond out of impulse, but silence gives you the rare advantage of responding with intention. And that gap between impulse and intention is where emotional strength is born. Silence teaches you restraint. It teaches you how to stand calmly in moments where you once would have exploded. It teaches you how to think clearly when everything around you feels chaotic. It teaches you that you don't need to participate in every emotional storm that passes by. You begin to see that being in control of yourself, your reactions, your tone, your energy, is the highest form of strength. You cannot master the world, but you can master yourself. And silence is the path to that mastery. Maturity grows in the quiet moments where you choose understanding over defending, patience over proving, and clarity over chaos. You start to realize that not every comment needs a response, not every misunderstanding needs a debate, and not every situation deserves your emotional investment. Maturity is found in the realization that your peace is worth more than your pride. It is found in the shift from reacting to everything to choosing what truly matters. And nothing helps you reach that level of maturity faster than the discipline of silence. There are times when your silence will speak louder than your words ever could. People will notice the difference in your energy. They will feel the shift when you stop engaging in unnecessary arguments. They will sense the calm in you, the steadiness in you, the growth in you. Silence becomes your subtle declaration that you no longer operate on the same emotional frequency you once did. You have elevated yourself. You have matured beyond the need for noise. But silence does something even deeper. It builds self-respect. Every time you choose silence over reacting out of hurt or frustration, you show yourself that you are capable of emotional control. Every time you walk away from conflict instead of drowning in it, you tell yourself that your peace matters. Every time you refuse to let someone's words dictate your emotions, you strengthen your self-worth. Silence becomes an act of honoring yourself, your dignity, your balance, your inner world. Self-respect grows when you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. It grows when you stop defending yourself in places where your truth is not valued. It grows when you stop chasing validation from those who do not offer genuine understanding. Silence becomes your way of saying, I know who I am. I do not need noise to prove it. That quiet confidence reshapes the way you move through the world. You stop attaching yourself to external reactions. You stop being pulled into emotional traps. You stop being accessible to every disturbance. Silence sharpens your intuition. Without noise, you can finally hear your own thoughts. You can sense what feels right, what feels wrong, and what feels misaligned. You can see intentions more clearly. You can feel energy shifts that words often hide. And when you trust your intuition, you stand stronger within yourself. Emotional strength is not just about resilience. It is about knowing when to engage and when to withdraw. Silence sharpens that wisdom. Through silence, you begin to observe more than you speak. You learn to read people, not by their words, but by their behaviors. You begin to understand the difference between sincerity and manipulation. You begin to see who brings peace and who brings disruption. You begin to recognize patterns you missed when you filled every moment with responses. Observation is a superpower, and silence is what activates it. Silence also frees you from emotional dependency. When you stop seeking reassurance from arguments, validation from explanations, or closure from confrontation, you become emotionally self-sufficient. Your worth no longer hangs on how others respond to you. Your stability no longer depends on external approval. You find strength in solitude, clarity in reflection, and peace in your own presence. You begin to love your own company, and that is one of the highest forms of self-respect. But silence is not always easy. At first, it feels uncomfortable because you are used to reacting, to defending, to explaining. The quiet feels too open, too vulnerable. But with time, silence becomes your comfort zone. It becomes your place of power, the place where you recharge emotionally and regain clarity. You start to appreciate the stillness. You start to crave it. You start to prioritize it. Silence becomes a part of your identity, not as something that makes you small, but something that expands your inner world. With silence, you begin to grow in directions that arguments cannot take you. You grow in patience. You grow in understanding. You grow in resilience. You grow in emotional intelligence. You grow in your ability to protect your peace. You grow into someone who no longer spills energy everywhere, but channels it intentionally. People will notice. They may even test your silence. Those who thrived on your reactions will try to provoke you. Those who were used to pulling you into conflict will feel the shift, but your silence will remain. Because once you learn the value of protecting your peace, you cannot unlearn it. Once you discover that silence strengthens you from the inside out, you refuse to give that power away. And so silence becomes more than a choice. It becomes a lifestyle, a practice, a source of strength, a sign of maturity, a declaration of self-respect. It is the quiet force that shapes you into someone who no longer breaks under pressure, no longer reacts to everything, and no longer allows the world to disturb the sanctuary within you. Silence reshapes you, and the person you become in that stillness is stronger, wiser, and more self-respecting than ever before. When conflict tries to pull you into chaos, choose the quiet path that leads back to yourself. Let your silence speak with dignity. Let it protect you. Let it heal you. And let it remind the world that peace is your priority, not winning an argument. In that sacred stillness, you will find the strength that noise could never give you.